We're live. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic, whatever day you're watching it, Saturday. So I was thinking about it the other day and really didn't get a chance to put together the video that I wanted to put together. You know, sometimes videos just don't really work out. So figured I would do this in a live show. And what it is which car do you wish you would have bought? In other words, not necessarily the one that got away, not the one that you had, not the one that was kind of sold out from underneath you, like that Roadrunner was with me, but what cars do you wish you would have bought? Michael Corleone is in with the flex. I like it. So one of the things that I started thinking about was, well, if I would have bought a car back then, if I were to jump in the Wayback Machine, what car was really catching my eye that I didn't buy? And mine are kind of, some are the usual suspects, but some are a little bit out there. And there's a couple of cars that maybe you hadn't thought of in a long time, or at least maybe just hadn't really considered. But I'm curious, as far as what you guys have wished you would have bought. And again, not necessarily the cars that got away, because those are the ones that you have and then you had it and you lost it. These are the ones that you just never had and never really thought to buy until way later. So for me, one of them is the Monte Carlo Aero Coupe. I don't know what it is about that car. I just always had kind of a thing for that car. And not that it would ever be fast, and not that it would ever be really anything special, I guess, but there was just something about it. The fact that it was a completely different car, well, if you consider the back glass being wedge-shaped, completely different. But it was something that you never ever really got a chance to see, and because of that, I always thought they were pretty cool. Not to mention, fairly easy to work on. 305 comes out, 383 goes in. You got yourself a strong running little hot rod that would be a riot to drive around with. So that was one of them, which obviously would blend into the next one, which for me would be an El Camino. I cannot believe I have never actually owned an Elco. My grandfather had a 69 SS Elco, and how cool would that be? But the fact of the matter is that, you know, to find a decent Elco nowadays is, well, it's pretty hard to do. And most of the folks that have them seem to think that, well, they're made out of platinum or something, because the pricing on them has been absolutely nuts. And the thing about me with Elcos is that I don't really care what year it is. Could be an early one, could be a late one. Even the big disco Elcos, I'm kind of a fan of those. By the way, you might notice that'll end up being a bit of a theme coming into this. But the Elco for me was always really cool. I had buddies of mine that had them in school, and yeah, they were always fun, and they always sounded good. And you know, how can it not sound good? You know, small block Chevrolet with long tube headers and, you know, pick a muffler, it doesn't matter. It's going to sound good. But I always thought it was a lot of fun to have. And, you know, we used to use them as beer wagons back in the day. I mean, they were a lot of fun. I just never actually owned one. Just kind of a shame, really. But anyway, that's another one. Now, those are more common cars. Those are cars that you would pretty much see all the time. I get it, the Aero Coupe not so much, but the Monte SS, yeah, you'd see that thing everywhere. And I always did have kind of an affinity for those cars. There was a Grand Prix that would run along the same lines, a Hearst Oldsmobile, kind of the same 80s flair. One other thing you might notice in this, at least with me, is a lot of these vehicles are not, the ones that I'll start bringing up really have nothing to do with the 60s. And the reason why they have nothing to do with the 60s is, well, when I was a kid, the 60s were just far enough in the past to where those cars were just old, worn out, used cars. It didn't really matter what it was. It could have been a 69 Camaro, 72 Camaro. It could have been a Dart. Could have been, I don't know, a Mustang. A lot of the cars from the 60s at that point in time had been ridden really hard and put up wet. And for me, well, they just weren't new. They were kind of a jalopy, really. I mean, yeah, they had big engines, but I mean, a big engine that spins to 4,500 RPM realistically. Sounded good, but I mean, they'd been through 5, 6 owners at that point. Holes in the floorboards, and you basically got half baked anytime you went anywhere because of exhaust leaks. Those were the types of things that really, for guys like me at the time, yeah, they were cool and they were neat and all, but you never saw a pristine one. The ones that I was exposed to were basically all, well, they're pretty well worn out, to be honest with you. I don't know of any of them that didn't smoke. So, but getting back to it, there's a couple of more that I wanted to bring up before I see where you guys are in this whole thing. But one of the funnier things that I was looking at is, you know, damn, I never really even considered it, would be the Aspen. I don't know if you guys are really familiar with this, but the Aspen showed up around, I don't know, 74 or something like that. Anyway, you could actually tart one of those things up pretty butch, as a matter of fact. There was even a Roadrunner variant of that car, which is a pretty badass car. And so to be able to find something like that, you know, if one were to come up, I would definitely be interested in buying one of those now. I would have never considered one of those cars back in the day, primarily because I didn't even know they existed. You know, these are the types of cars where, you know, the cars from the 60s would kind of end up overshadowing these, you know, mid-70s, early 80s offerings. But again, the more you get into it, the more you start looking at them, the more you're like, man, there's actually some really cool features to these cars. And if nothing else, well, not only did they look pretty cool, but they were just so different. But anyway, that is another one for me. Those Aspen-based Roadrunners. I always thought were really, really cool. Surprised that I never had heard of one, but if I would have heard of one, I would have loved to get my hands on one of those things. I think direct connection era. Those are really the cars that I was looking at. Man, don't inhale Gatorade. Let's see. Gary is in. Chuck is in. Excuse me. So those are the types of cars that I was looking at as far as, you know, what are the types of, which cars do you wish you would have bought? I'll tell you another one that I wish I would have bought is a Monza. And, damn, I'm dying over here. I know that the Monza is kind of a weird one to call out. But if you think about it, it's this perfect platform for modification. Get one with a small block. Get one, I think they even came with 4 speeds. They're light as, they're just basically a stretched Vega with a little bit different nose on the thing. And I thought, man, that would be an amazing car. Why is it that I didn't know about the Monza? You know, there's so many places in history where these cars were practically disposable, which kind of falls in line with the Mopar stuff. The Dart is kind of one that falls into that as well. And for me, the Dart, I never could find one. I went looking for one at one point, couldn't really ever find one. And, well, to be honest, some of the ones that I was finding were pretty well clapped out. So it was really difficult to dredge one up, if you will. It's a little bit tough to find one that didn't look like it had basically survived a hurricane, at least none the worse for wear, you know what I mean? But those are a few just right off the top of my head. Figured I would share that with you. This is one of those situations where I was trying to put together a video, and it really never could get moving, you know. And a lot of times the standalone videos, and y'all know me, I don't do any editing. It's just all raw footage, cut it, send it, you know, that's it. And again, for me, it was just so difficult because I was going, man, there's so many different cars that I, for whatever reason, never considered, that I will probably never own just because there's only so much time in the day, and the fact that a lot of these cars are getting really, really old just in terms of number of owners and just neglect, things like that. There's a lot of those cars that are just not ever going to be, the best way to put it is worth the money that you would put into them. You know, talking about an Aspen or a, you know, those Roadrunner variants of the Aspen, I don't really know how collectible those would ever be. I know that they never really made it to the top of anybody's list, so probably not something a lot of people are chasing after. But I guess if you could find one that was in good shape, that'd be pretty cool. I just don't know that you ever could, because there's going to be so many people that have gotten their hands on it. And again, at one point in time, those things were practically disposable. People turned them into race cars if they even lasted that long. It's kind of crazy. So, Challenger 50 saying, I test drive almost bought the Roadrunner Aspen. Cool. Also was looking at a Trans Am. I ended up with a Datsun B210. Go figure. So the Trans Am thing was always real intriguing to me. The thing with the Trans Am is that my dad had one. My dad had a 79 gold Trans Am, and that was an awesome car. I loved it. Pissed when he got rid of it. But for whatever reason, the TA, I feel like I kind of leapfrogged the TA for some reason, because I was able to experience one when I was a kid, and I mean, I didn't drive it. I was way too young, but yeah, it was one of these things where really cool car, but by the time I was old enough and was in a position where I could, you know, buy something, a lot of the Trans Ams were either, again, kind of clapped out, or they were a little bit too expensive at the time. And you know, the funny thing about the Trans Am, especially in the way things have been lately, the funny thing about the Trans Am is that the bottom, basically, you couldn't find a bottom for a Trans Am, and that is to say that you couldn't find a decent one. Trans Ams, again, fell into that whole, I don't know, like blender of owners that would either modify them, or they would just sit around, they would rot, something would go bad, they couldn't afford to fix them, and you'd have a really nice car that would just end up turning into dust. And so finding a nice one was tough, or finding one that would be a candidate for restoration, like a legit candidate for restoration, was tough, because again, if you get 3/4 of the way through the project and want to pull the ripcord, well, you might be out thousands of dollars on one of those things. I'm kind of walking in lockstep with the TA though, because the Trans Am for me, I have to admit, didn't really fall into that category. At one point in time, I went looking for a 73 or a 74 Trans Am. A Formula would have been just as good as far as I was concerned. Super Duty 455 would have been cool. Really wanted to build a 400 variant. And I got hot to trot over that for a grand total of probably 7 or 8 days. I mean, I was really into it, tried to find one. And as I was looking for these cars, just the handful that I was running into were beat up pretty good, which leads me into my next car. Now, this is one that is kind of near and dear to my heart, be a C3 Corvette. The thing is, I never really considered C3 Corvettes. I always wanted a 71 big block car. I just really like the 70 and 71. I like the gills on the side. And, you know, my dad had a 69 big block drop top, sweet ass vet. I still have very vivid memories of that car. So, I really like this 70, 71, went searching at one point in time. And what I discovered with those cars is, this is the scare. Oh, and I also was looking at actual C2 big block cars. I looked at those a little bit too. Here's what I discovered about those cars. That is one of the worst traps for anybody looking for a cool car, a collectible car. People think Corvette, they think fiberglass, they think it doesn't rust, there's, no issues that you're really going to run into. Let me tell you all the problems you run into with Corvettes, not the least of which is rust. So one of the Vettes that I looked at was criminally pretty. So white coupe, big block car. This is going back some years, and this is the car that actually scared me half to death of Corvettes. The problem with this car is it was an original Survivor car, but two issues here. One, let me just break it down to one main issue. We'll deal with the engine stuff in a minute. Everything that fiberglass bolts to or adheres to is metal. And everything underneath this car was showing significant signs of deterioration. This rust like you wouldn't believe. And the thing about it is, I had the guy, it was at a classic car dealership, and I was really interested in this car. Had the guy put it on a lift, and it was awful underneath this car. And I'm no expert. If you would have thought that somebody would have tried to do something to clean this thing up. Anyway, that's the car that scared me half to death of C3s, is the fact that you can have one that looks amazing from standing next to it, only to have something that could literally be deteriorating underneath it. Now, the engine thing, the problem with a lot of the cars from the 60s, early 70s, anything that's high compression requires leaded fuel. A lot of those engines, if you didn't run lead additive, over time would start to sink valves. It basically means that the valve is getting kind of tuliped, and that's not a good thing. And it's beating the seat to death. Anyway, there's a lot of issues that can come from that. Car had a slight miss, and I'm thinking that was probably one of the cases with that thing. It had been run on unleaded for way too long. Some cars you can get away with, others you can't. Anyway, just another observation on that. Chuck saying, on this topic for tonight, my car list is Super B, a GTO, Olds 442, and a Duster. Very nice. I want to say good evening, Professor Mason. Thanks for sharing your infinite knowledge. Oh, thanks for hanging out. I wouldn't call it infinite, though. Just ask my wife. It is very finite. But it's kind of weird though. Cars that you wouldn't have considered. I kind of just stumbled into this place, and wow, that's really nice. Let's check it out. What does it look like underneath? Let's see what see how well it's put together. I was really just looking to see what the suspension components look like, and start to poking and prodding, and fingers go through things that they're not supposed to. Something's gone completely wrong. But like I say, when I said earlier, the usual suspects, Grand Nationals come to mind. The thing is that I kind of also leapfrogged, however you say it, Grand Nationals in a way, because I remember being very young when the Grand Nationals came out. I remember going for a ride. We had a neighbor that had bought one, and the first Grand National, I couldn't have been more than 10 years old, maybe, riding in that car. Anyway, it was a sweet car. The thing about it is that by the time I got into high school, those cars were being turned into race cars pretty regularly. I mean, it was not uncommon to see one that had been pretty well butchered up. Tuning, bigger turbos, camshafts, rockers, you name it. All of that was being done to those Grand Nationals way back then. And I mean, it was kind of funny. You'd see a lot of them, especially at the drag strip, or, at street racing, where they would go down the road kind of crooked because they were twisted. So whether it was a T-Type, which is another one that I thought was really cool, or the actual Grand National, they were all getting turned into race cars at that point in time. And that's when, the technology explosion was really starting to take place. And you had guys that were putting a lot of time and effort into these V6s and the turbo combinations and really making those things fast. Fast, I get it, is a relative term today, but this is when an 11-second car was screaming, and I distinctly remember seeing Grand Nationals and T-Types running high 11s. It's a pretty fast car for the day. And one that was somewhat streetable, at least back then. But I never really considered one later on, and I kind of wish I would have bought one, not really ever realizing that they would become as popular as they are today. See, the thing about the Grand National that always kind of messed with my head was, well, there's two things. One, I was always surprised that they killed it. I couldn't believe that platform would ever stop. Like, why would you not make the Grand National? Mainly because it was such a push forward in technology. And for me, being a kid back then, and this is why the Grand National does still pull at a lot of guys' heartstrings. Guys that are maybe in their mid to late 30s, early to mid 40s, maybe even early 50s. The reason why the Grand National tugs at their heartstrings so much is because their dads and grandads all had V8s. They all had, there's no replacement for displacement and all that other good stuff. Well, here's this little V6 with a turbocharger on it that's going out and hurting a lot of people's feelings. And it was the technology behind it. It was the muscle car for the new generation. Just so happens I was too dang young to ever get involved with one. But the reality is that it really spoke to a lot of folks of a certain age back then because, well, that was the new technology. That was what was going to supersede all of the old V8 technology and all the old V8 stuff and the big blocks and all of that. That's old man business. This is young, it's new, it's the same styling, it's the same really cool Bush styling, but it's got the technology and all the power and everything else and all this upgradability and this infinite seemingly power numbers that you could get out of these things. I mean, even way back then, it was fairly understandable that 450 horsepower was a foregone conclusion. And this is at a point in time where 450 horsepower was it was a direct line of sight bullseye on everything that was the old generation in terms of power plants. So it was really cool for a lot of guys to be a part of that because they felt like this is our new thing. And the weird thing is that it didn't last. I mean, yeah, I get it, the Cyclone and the Typhoon and all of that, but it took forever for V6s, V6 turbo combinations like the T-Type and the Grand National to come back into favor. And I get it. You talk about the Japanese cars, the 300, the 3000. I get it. Okay. There was a lot of V6 turbos that came at GTR. I know. But here's the thing. It was never really embraced by Mustang. It was never embraced by Camaro. And of course, at that point in time, Dodge had really nothing that was or would have been a V6. Everything that they were offering was the 2.2 or 2.5 liter 4-cylinder turbo. Another cool combination, but nothing that muscle car guys really took seriously. I mean, it's a 4-cylinder. A 6-cylinder, on the other hand, well, a lot of guys can understand 6 cylinders. V6s, well, sure, GMC had a 5-liter V6 that they had in pickup trucks. And it wasn't the most common thing in the world, but guys were hot rodding inline sixes for a long time. And a lot of guys to this day prefer to hot rod and play with inline six engines. They're just a lot of fun. It puts you at a really fun power level, power to weight, and all of that. Plus, they sound different. A lot of guys really like those things. Be surprised. I like them. Just not enough to buy one. Anyway, you get the idea. When all of that was taking place, the younger generation at the time was thinking, okay, this is all going to take on. And when it didn't, and it kind of died on the vine, and a lot of that technology was being put into V8s and making them a lot more efficient to where you didn't need to have a V6 with a turbo to get good performance and good fuel economy. You just do that with the V8. And by the way, you'd start picking up power through efficiency. Not too shabby. And so here we are again today. But let me check in with you guys. Let's see. 62 Power saying, hello, Dr. Mason. What's up, 62? Saying, what are your thoughts on the new NHRA rules allowing all modern cars 2014 to current can run 9.0 at 150 without a cage? Thanks, Tesla Plaid. Well, don't just thank the Tesla Plaid. You can thank any Hellcat variant that's ever had any modification done to it and sent down a drag strip. You can also thank the Mustangs and the Camaros of the world. Here's the thing. Modern cars are crazy easy to make run 9s. As a matter of fact, you can do it almost accidentally. It wasn't that long ago where 11 seconds would get you thrown off the track if you didn't have a cage, or at least a partial cage in this case, being a hard top. Well, thing is that since then, cars have simply gone faster. And when you take cars that are already running deep into the 10s, like your garden variety Hellcat on a tire, or a boosted Mustang, or a ZL1 with a little bit of pepper thrown at it and a drag pack, next thing you know, you're all running 9s anyway. And to be fair, tracks, you got to have those 9-second cars coming through the gate. You really do. It's if you don't have mid to low 10-second, high to mid 9-second cars coming to your drag strip, they're out on the street drag racing. That's just the way that it works out. And so a lot of tracks were basically turning a blind eye. And you get over a certain mile an hour, you might need to go ahead and start considering a cage or at least a parachute. Make sure your brakes are up to the task. I'd say somewhere north of about 150, 160 miles an hour in the quarter. Yeah, you're going to need a little bit more in line in terms of safety equipment to keep you in line, or at least safe, right? Well, one of the issues that they were having, again, is that a lot of track officials were kind of turning a blind eye to it, because you can literally with a Hellcat run a 9-second quarter mile and not honestly mean to do it. You take a stock boost Hellcat, put a 309 gear in it, a healthy tune, a set of pumps and injectors, and run E85 in that thing, and there is a darn good chance you're going to come away from that in good air with a 9-second time slip. There's really nothing done to the car other than a little bit of a gear factory part, some injectors, debatable, but in a set of fuel pumps, and you're going 9s? Pretty easy to do. But then you start to look at all the cars now unmodified that run 9-second quarter miles. You know, it's funny, the Demon came into existence when it ran a 965, and it was not NHRA legal because it didn't have a cage. Well, it didn't take too many Demons going to the drag strip and not getting kicked off before folks were starting to figure out that modern cars are so fast from the factory anyway. If you can't run a factory car at the drag strip, what are you supposed to do with it? I got a perfect example of that. My 97 GTS Viper on stock tires with paper tags, I went an 1170 at 122 miles an hour. Pretty fast by the day's standard. And I got punted off of the drag strip. Going, what? The car's bone stock. I remember that argument very clearly. So it was an interesting situation to find yourself in when you have the rules changing at the rate that they're changing. But again, look at the number of cars that are running 9s from the factory. Porsche, Tesla, I get it. Pretty much, I don't know if there's a whole lot of manufacturers stateside, but there's a lot of cars with just a couple of modifications that start running 9s. And to be real honest with you, asking those guys to put a cage in those cars is not going to happen. Imagine putting cages in Hellcats just to go 9s after you've done really nothing to the car to get it there. Yeah, that's how you don't have cars show up to the drag strip. So, yeah, I can definitely see it, completely understand it, especially when you consider the fact that, well, the other part of this is if you're going to be the NHRA, you got to have people racing at your track. And yeah, people don't mind going and they have a lot of fun with their street cars on your typical Friday night. But, what keeps these tracks afloat are the Friday nights. And, well, if you've got really nobody showing up with anything that's interesting to look at or fast street cars showing up, where do you think they're going to be doing all their work? Well, they'll be doing that on the street. And by the way, car owners don't see the NHRA as being all high and mighty. Like, you tell me I got to put a cage in my car? How about I don't ever come to your track again? I got a lot of other things I can do with my money and my time than show up here for whatever event that you have. That attitude has not gone unnoticed as well. So, yeah, I'm not surprised they started getting a little bit more lax with that. And who's to say that number just doesn't keep dropping with some of the EVs that are presumably going to be heading our way here in the next 3 to 5 years? I wouldn't be surprised if there's some 8-second variants showing up. Time to lower the bar a little bit further. Chuck's asking, there is a new Challenger Jailbreak I read about. Isn't it a red eye? It is. The Jailbreak option is more or less a more customizable version of a red eye. There's a few things that you can't get with the Jailbreak or a red eye in general, which is a manual transmission, if you even are interested in that. By the way, sales figures would insinuate that you're not. But, the different color brake calipers, the different configurations that you can put into that car. One thing that I noticed about the Jailbreak, and you guys correct me if I am wrong about this, but one of the things that I noticed, I went to the build your own section of the Dodge website just to kind of get an idea for what the Jailbreak was all about. And I found, and maybe they've added it since then, or maybe I just completely spaced out and didn't see it, you cannot get, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'll own this if I'm wrong, but I didn't see where you could option a rear seat delete. You can option that with a red eye, and you might even be able to option it now with a Hellcat, but can't do it for the Jailbreak? Kind of weird. Anyway, one of the things that I saw that I'm still a little bit on the fence about was the side stripe for the Jailbreak, although I think it looked pretty good in the rendering that I was playing with. But one thing you can't do is you can't option the side stripe with the blackout hood hood, roof, and trunk package. I thought that was weird. I mean, it should just be, in my opinion, if you want the blackout hood, you get the blackout hood. You want the roof and the trunk, cool too. You want the side stripe, hey, more to it. If you're paying for it, we'll put it on there. Maybe they just don't have the configurator thing working right. Maybe it's just not complete yet. I don't know. But I get, one of the things that I really like is being able to pick the color of your brake calipers, because I will be changing the color of my brake calipers here probably tomorrow. In fact, I was doing some test panels, if you want to call them that. I was actually just hitting some old rotors with different caliper paints. And I think, well, the color is just going to be kind of more of a flat black. I'm really not going for any pop. I'm not looking for any specific color or anything like that. The issue that I have is the Brembos that I have are red. Obviously, it's a 2015. The problem with the red calipers is that over time, they fade a little bit. And it's kind of weird because my car rarely sees the light of day. When it's driven, it's primarily driven at night. And it just cracks me up. Anyway, I was looking at it in the sun today, and I got to looking at it and I was going, well, it's two different shades of red, which doesn't really jive all that well. But the other thing is that the red, it's getting a little Valentine's Day looking for me. Redline red is a little bit more of a rich looking red. And with the brighter, kind of louder looking red coming off of the calipers, it's a bit of a clash. So I was playing around with the idea, like, what color would I do? Would I do gray? Would I do this? Would I do that? And come to find out, there's just not a lot of options. Caliper paint comes in, I don't know, not a whole lot of color palettes. If you want black, you can get black. If you want glossy black, you can get glossy black. So you got glossy and matte black, red. I think there's a couple. I think there's a couple of folks that have like a gold or something like that. And I don't want anything that's going to be overly complicated. I'm practically to the point where if I just mask everything off and hit it with some barbecue pit paint, I'll probably be just as happy. So, but I will be changing the colors of the calipers, going with an actual caliper paint, going to mask everything off and look great when I'm done with it. And the main thing is that I'm not going to have to stare at these two different shades of red. And I'm definitely stoked that I'm not going to have to deal with the calipers, again, fading over time. And in this case, also to that point, you get rock chips along with the fading of the paint or the coating or whatever they put on those things. And man, I just want to be able to get in there, look at it and go, done, and, move on. To me, it's also a maintenance thing more than anything else. So aside from that, I'm putting a new set of brake pads on the back of the car, going with a set of Z26s. I think they're 1095s is the part number. Anyway, the factory brake pads are starting to get a little bit, worn, considering they've got about, I don't know, close to seemingly what we would think would be 1,000 burnouts on them at the drag strip. So time to put on a new set of pads. So I'm going to knock that out. And that's part of the whole idea. While I'm there, I'll just get everything masked off and, get that whole project cleaned up, and I'll be a lot happier after it's said and done. Again, when it's sitting in the shop here, you don't really notice it. But again, you get the thing out on the street or at night, and that's really when you notice it more than anything, because that red line red will kind of color shift. It goes from being kind of a lipstick red to being more of a really deep red, and the calipers really start to clash with it at that point. Randy's in from Middle Tennessee. I like it. 6-2 saying, well said. Have a great night. Thank you very much. Randy's saying he's got good luck with high temp paint. Proper prep is the key, but even then it's a couple year option. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I mean, I'm looking at it kind of along those lines. I mean, look, at some point I'm going to have to start doing something with these calipers. They are starting to fade for whatever reason. And I figure if it's a touch-up thing here and there, if I need to touch it up every year or two, a touch-up for me, it's going to take a grand total of about 5 minutes per wheel, unless I'm really doing a redo on the thing. But it's got to happen at some point. And this is just it's an easy option. It's an easy to maintain. If I get some chips or some flakes, you just hit it with some paint. It's a caliper, for crying out loud. But it is getting to the point now where I'm noticing it more and more. And I'm not just noticing it on my car. I'm noticing it on other older Mopars as well. Oh, Himmy Dad's asking if he's saying, Professor, do you know what's going on with Dodge and M6s for Hellcats these days? Are they ever coming back? Well, I mean, it is still an option for the Cat. The problem is, are you going to be able to find one? Probably not. If you order one, maybe. The problem is, and I haven't done the build your own, maybe they killed the option. But the issue that I've found with the manual Hellcats is that they're a fun, nostalgic sounding proposition, but once you drive one and then drive a Hellcat with an automatic, you are immediately very aware of just the sheer difference in acceleration and just the overall feel of the car. And a lot of guys, they're buying Hellcats because they want something that is going to be really fast in a straight line, quarter mile type stuff. You get the idea. 6-speed's not there for you. And the other issue is that first gear is just so long that it can be a little bit of a bear to drive for guys, especially if you're used to driving an NA car with a first gear that's like a 297 or a 3.0, 331, something along those lines, with a fairly healthy rear end. Well, in this case, you've got a 220 something rear end or 220 something gear ratio, which is for a lot of guys their second gear. And on top of that, you've got, well, a 370 rear gear. And that doesn't do you a whole lot of good when your car weighs 4,600 pounds minimum. So yeah, something to think about with that. And the bottom line is that they would make a lot more of them if people bought a lot more of them. And the fact is, Hellcat buyers buy the automatics. Juxon, thank you very much. He says, I have a small rock peen dent on the roof of my RT Shaker in Tor Red. Can you suggest a good pulling tool? The dent is tiny. The problem with little dents is that they're very sharp edged a lot of times. And I've struggled with this in the past, and it can get real frustrating. Most of the time, if it's one of the itty bitty ones, like say if it's, let me see if I can find something over here that, like, say if it's one of the ones that are like the end of this little clicker thing right here, like if they're just super, super small like that, a lot of times if you pull the headliner, like this is, in this case, it's on your roof, right? So if it's on your roof, you can get a block, put a microfiber towel underneath it, get a block, but you'd have to pull the headliner out and get a flat mallet and just gently work it. You need somebody to hold the block on top. And what you would do is you gently work that little dent, and you just basically try to draw it back flat. It's time consuming. But that's probably how a body shop would try to tackle it if they weren't filling it and, basically scuff it, fill it, prime it, color it, send it. I mean, that would be the other way to do it. There's really no good way to pull the little dents out. A lot of times, if you have something that's more of a long, deep dent, well, better way of putting it. There are several techniques. You get the hot glue technique that some guys will try to use. There's a lot of techniques. That's where you get the glue sticks and you basically melt them into the metal. It doesn't get really all that hot. And you can pop them and it'll pull the dent out. I've seen that done a few times and seems to work. But for the little ones are usually the tough part about the little one is that they have more impact. It just pops it really hard. So if it's a true dent, that's gonna be a pain. But thank you for the contribution, man. I appreciate that. Oh, Randy's saying, just read about the new inline 6 with 5.7 power, 2024 for Dodge. So I've heard about this inline 6 and it's been coming for a while. They were talking about an inline 6 with a turbo, which I was just absolutely enamored with because that is right up my alley. Man, if they make it, that would be sweet because that would mean that my next work truck would be the inline 6 with a turbo. And stuff that comes from the factory with turbos is always a good thing. So yeah, I would be really, really stoked about that. Oh, hang on just a second. Amy Dad said, I'm still holding out for an M6. No, I hear you, brother. Andy's saying he likes his manual cat. I'll say the wide body is the way to go. The gears are long and it's theft proof. No doubt, right? Actually, if you do a couple of things to the manual cars, it helps them immensely. So one of the things, obviously, is the clutch line restrictor mod. Get that thing out of there. The other thing is if you can make it work, put a 392 rear gear in the thing. That'll help things a little bit. I know it's not much of a difference between 370 and 392, but look, anything's going to help you. The other thing is obviously going to be in the tune. Driver demand adjustments are going to be a big help just to make the thing a little bit more responsive. But you can also get away with that with a pedal box, pedal commander, any products like that. So, if you look at it from that point of view, I mean, it's just a couple of parts bin conversions and you're sort of there. So here's the thing. I actually kind of like the manual Hellcats. One of my favorite packages to drive in the Hellcat was a single pulley, like a 275, or rather in this case, it was a 295. 275 would start to get you into just getting into E85 for those cars. But I don't want to scare you into doing that. Just a little bit less extreme. 295 upper pulley, 392 gear, clutch restrictor mod, and what else was done to that thing? Stock airbox. Anyway, that's basically about it that was done to that car. And that was a lot of fun. That car was real peppy, real snappy. And, you'd start to get the feel for the thing. After about 5 minutes, you would kind of get the idea that the car might have been a little bit lighter than Barton shifter, obviously. Duh. But that was kind of the default recipe, if you will, for the M6 cars. Like you would do that to the M6 car and then That'd be it. Because, I mean, unless they were trying to get into doing half mile or mile racing, there really wasn't anything else to do to those things. Just because they were a lot of fun just like that. Oh, Chuck saying his dent is too small for a puller. Yeah, that's going to end up being, that's the pain, man. You got to end up getting in there, and the little ones are the ones that'll drive you absolutely nuts because your eye is just drawn to it every single time. So yeah, that would probably be my course of action, is to try to see if you could get away with it that way. I mean, obviously, like I say, a body shop is going to take one look at that. They're going to scuff it, fill it, prime it, paint it, send it. So that's going to pretty much be how that goes. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just, you know, I've been there. As a matter of fact, I was almost in the same boat as you. On the driver's side, passenger side, front fender, I caught a rock on that thing that chipped the paint, and I could have sworn dented that fender. It was just buzzing around the loop one night, just putting miles on the car. I hadn't driven the thing in forever, and just trying to actually burn some old gas out of it. And nobody on the road. I don't know where these rocks come from. It's like a freaking meteorite hit the thing, because there was literally nobody around me for 100 yards. Anyway, I heard it just pop. I'm going, what the anyway. By the time I got back to the shop, I'd forgotten all about it. And I'm walking around the car when I was doing the 4-hole spacer on Sierra. Oh, fun story about Sierra. Don't let me forget about that. Anyway, I was doing the 4-hole spacer on Sierra, and walking right by the car, I just kind of happened to look down and notice. In fact, I'd already bought the paint and everything else for the calipers. And I walked by and looked down. I'm going, what the hell is that? And it looked like, I don't know, some little elf had just sand wedged part of the paint off. So I had to go in with the paint pen, wherever my paint pen ran off to. Anyway, I had to go in with the paint pen, kind of chip away at the paint, make sure there wasn't any, basically you make it like this. You don't want the paint all catty jack this in there. Get in there with the paint thing, pop all the paint, make it kind of flushed out, fill that thing, and then sand it down, buff it, and try to fix that thing with that little paint thing. It's tough to do with the little touch-up paint things. They're not that they're bad or anything, but the problem is that the touch-up paint for Redline Red is eerily, it's darker than the actual color that it's going on. So anyway, it too, that little chip was about that big. It was about the end, almost, I'd say about almost a little bit more than 3/4 the size of the end of this pin right here. So yeah, I had to go in and fill it. I had my heat gun, so I'm just like, come on, cure. And then I would take 800 grit and just sit there with a block and just looking at it, kind of get everything kind of flat. Does it look flat? Okay, hit it with some 1000 grit, kind of blend everything in, not even putting any pressure on the block. I mean, basically almost playing with it like a Hot Wheels car. And just trying to scuff everything up kind of uniformly, and then hit it with compound, hit it with, actually I hit it with compound, hit it with the Griot's 3-in-1, and then I just waxed it after that. And I was like, you're done. And now I don't notice it. So that's one of the things. If I'm walking by the car, I literally don't notice. It's not a perfect fix, but, I'm also not a paint and body guy. I can just kind of fix things, but I can't, it's not going to be the best result. And in this case, it worked out pretty good. But I had a couple of things. I started looking at stuff around the car. You know how it gets. And about every time I drive the thing, I get some kind of rock chip, and I just say, oh, screw it. It is what it is. Giving up. Cameron's got a good one. I would say, and I wish I would have bought the SRT 10 Ram or the 3rd or 4th gen Viper and the SRT Magnum. So let's talk about the SRT Magnum. Y'all know that I am definitely a bit of a wagon guy. I love the SUVs. I love wagons just in general. And the SRT Magnum is one that I had a conversation. This guy, you guys, if you know the story, you know where I'm going with this. I was at Mecum in 2016 when the Viper was going away, and this was right after the Magnum had gone away. And I was talking to one of the marketing guys there that was really in the know. I mean, this is an SRT marketing guy. He knew basically everything that was going on. Had a real long conversation with him. It was really, really enlightening. I can tell you that. And I asked about the Magnum. I said, why is it that the Magnum, why do we not have the Magnum? It's pretty good response. He goes, did you buy one? I said, well, no, I never did. And he goes, stop you right there. That's the reason why we don't make them anymore. I mean, great car. Everybody loved them. Nobody bought them. Oh, I'm kind of seeing it. But what would have been cool about the Magnum is if it would have been at least carried over with the refresh. A Magnum post-refresh would be like way at the top of my list of stuff to just have to have. But another car, you had mentioned that SRT truck or the third or fourth gen Viper. I never considered the third or fourth gen Viper. Isn't that weird? Maybe the fourth gen. The third gen, I just, for whatever reason, never really could warm up to that car. The fourth gen, a little bit, and certainly the fifth. But the fourth, pretty sweet car, I gotta admit. But yeah, those are some that I never really considered. The funny thing, the SRT-10 truck, I remember that's actually a really good one because I remember vividly those trucks selling for $8,000, $9,000 on the used car market. And I remember thinking, I think the engine is worth more than that. But it's kind of a niche market. How many people are really clamoring for Viper engines? And it's, I guess, you make so many Viper engines, you got to find something to put them in. And anyway, it was always kind of it was an exotic thing, but I was also really into Lightnings at that time. And so it was SRT-10 versus Lightning. And as you would expect, Lightnings would get way out on an SRT-10 and the SRT-10 would start reeling in the Lightning on the big end of the track. Pretty much how it went every single time. And I never really thought of the SRT-10 truck as being something overly special, because it was just my competitor. It was the guy that I was running against. And in hindsight, they're super cool trucks. It's just kind of funny how your brain doesn't allow you to, I guess, see them in that light. I don't know. It's just kind of weird, but you're exactly right on that. And how cool would it be to be able to get your hands on one of those now that you're this far separated? Especially when you start thinking about how powerful today's cars are. Any of the Viper variants are going to make less power than your base model Hellcat engine. So, I mean, they're neat and all, don't get me wrong, but those would be the cars really to find and the trucks to find. So good call on that. Chuck, thank you very much. Saying I'm putting new rubber on my RT shaker in the spring. Can I go from 245 45 020s to 275s without changing rims? Yes, you would go 275 40 R20, and that will be the tire that you will absolutely fall in love with on that car. I can tell you that combination is probably one of my favorite just in terms of aesthetics. The Scats with the stock Hellcat size tire on the back just looks good. So It's the same height, so it blends in really well. So yeah, you'll love it for sure. Himmy Dad, thank you very much, man. Saying agree on the coolness of the Magnum. Man, I lusted after those back in the day. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you. Oh, thank you. Appreciate you, man. Long live the manuals for sure. So, to that point, I had a fun time today. I was able to put a little bit different tune on Sierra. And in this case, I'm mainly talking to my old school guys out there. So it had really nothing to do with the carburetor. The carburetor is what it is. It's set up as rich as I can get it without pulling jets or doing anything like that. It's got the most aggressive springs in it. Accelerator pump is at its most aggressive setting, and the truck seems to like it. The 4-hole spacer did richen the truck up a little bit. So it got me to thinking, let's throw a little bit more timing at this thing, grab the draggy, and, well, let's have a little bit of fun with this thing. And it's kind of a crisp day. So what I did is I set base timing and went from 12 to basically 14-ish. And 3,000 RPM, once all the advances in on that truck, I'm right at 36-ish, like maybe 36 and change in terms of degrees of timing. So with the 4-hole spacer, this is kind of funny. With the 4-hole spacer and now running more timing because it was richer, and admittedly, I was a little bit under timed at about 34 degrees, really 33 degrees. I decided to take the thing out and go draggy it. And what is funny is the truck has absolutely no traction in first gear. It just lights the tires up, but it has just enough traction and it runs out of breath just enough at about 4,700 RPM to where it'll get to its shift point and then shift into second. It'll just light the tires up, and then shift. A lot of times we'll get a little bit of a wiggle out of it on the 1-2 shift just because it's, barking the tires pretty good, but it peg legs pretty good. Anyway, long story short, in fairly similar conditions, because the last time I draggied it, it was kind of cool outside too. And the truck went traction limited, and I mean very limited, like 1620 or something like that. And I was like, man, not bad considering it smoked the tires all the way through first gear. Well, this time it went a 1560 something. I think it was a 1567, and it was doing the same thing, just lighting the tires up. It just pulls like a freight train at the shift, through the shift, and then into third gear, where it's just pulling harder through the fat part of that curve. The thing about it, though, is that now, this is so my luck. The thing about it is that now with the 4-hole spacer making more torque, and with the timing, obviously also making more torque, and it's more timing at partial throttle as well, it's just making more power everywhere, which is getting it re-geared and pulling the 411 or whatever it is in the rear of that truck out and putting 354s in it even higher on my list of things to do with that truck, because it is brutal driving that thing. So the thing is that truck, it would cruise at 75, but there really wasn't much left in it at 75. And today, it's like you're cruising along, rolling to the throttle, and it's 70, 75, coming up on 80, 85, 90. And you're like, damn, this tank is going 90 miles an hour. Like, what? Shit. So anyway, it's a lot of fun just being able to play with that truck. But I guess where I was going with that, with the manual thing, was I was also able to, I didn't really get a chance to play around too much with Foxy, but I was running her and didn't really get a chance to put her through her paces or anything like that, but was, moving her around a little bit. And it felt good, having that, being back in a manual transmission was a lot of fun. So y'all know how much I love driving that car. It is a riot. So, but yeah, Sierra's running really good with that, with that 4-hole spacer and a little bit more timing. Let's see. Randy's saying the repair shop guys at the Saturn paint plant used these hardened wires, 1/8 inch diameter, bent into different shapes with a T-handle. They would work the tip around the backside of the dent to remove. Can do that? Yep, absolutely. And again, Chuck and Timmy, thank you all very much. Cameron saying, agree, the Magnum was super special. Could you see the Magnum returning to the lineup in one of the new EV platforms? Man, that's tough to say. And the reason why I say that is because so many manufacturers are moving away from car platforms and are really working more towards crossovers and SUVs. What would be kind of cool is if they maybe blended it with SUV, maybe made something like a, I don't know. Yeah, the Magnum, no, it's not. Well, the LX platform is, I don't know, not too much longer for the world it looks like anyway, so it would be tough. But it would be neat if they would do something sporty, SUV-y. We'll see what the STLA large platform will actually allow. But that's where you would find it. But the cool thing about it is if it were a stretched STLA large platform with motors front and rear, it'd be a lot of room for batteries. So Callis is saying, should have bought a Challenger back in 2013, but at the time, I just didn't think anything of them. So, to that point, let's see. This would have been in 2014 or 2013. When were the Signature Series cars out? Anyway, it was a Signature Series candy cane car, no less. 20-inch wheels, automatic car that really got me back into Mopar. The thing is I didn't buy it, but I did test drive it. And at the time, I think it was like a $37,000 car. It's still a fairly expensive car at the time, but when I drove that car, I had my Lightning, and I had spent an astronomical amount of time working on transmission tuning. I would drive the truck, make a change, drive the truck, make another change. A lot of it had to do with torque converter, clutch, lockup points, mile an hour. When that took place, this is all done through SCT Pro. Trying to tune the transmission action around a large AccuFab throttle body, which for a lot of guys would create a lot of problems because the truck would want to shift early because of reasons that I won't bore you to tears with. So anyway, I was doing a lot of transmission tuning with the Lightning. And man, I got it down perfect. Should have never gotten rid of that truck. Anyway, story for another day. I get behind the wheel of the Signature Series car. And again, it was really pretty white with the red livery going along the back, 20-inch wheel car. And I drove it. And one of the things that I came away from with that car was how good the transmission program was in that thing. It really didn't matter how fast it was, the speed, or anything else. That was a little bit irrelevant because what I took away was that the car was so responsive. And this is the old NAG1 platform. And again, the car was just so nice to drive. And it was a little expensive. I can't really remember the number, but I remember thinking, damn, that's kind of high. But I remember distinctly thinking that, I have put all of this work into this transmission tune with this Lightning, and this car right off the showroom floor really does have transmission tuning figured out. So that was actually kind of a fun thing for me. Tux is in saying, hey, B. Mason, hey, buddy, how are things? They're doing well. Hope they're good with you. Cal is saying, my dad should have bought the Buick Grand National when it came out. I was too young. I understand that completely. There's in saying, what up, Mason? Got the flex. I like it. Chuck saying, smash the like button. That's right. Give that like button all the love. Chuck's asking, why did the Celine Challengers flop? The funny thing is that Celine, I don't think he really had any traction with the Challengers at that point. And I honestly think that he may have been kind of out of the picture as well at that point. Steve Celine did a lot of good with the Mustang, but I just don't know that he was able to ever transition outside of the S7, his own car. but I don't think that he was ever actually able to transition out from underneath that umbrella of Ford, or the cloud, I should say, that Ford created for him, or he created himself with the Fords. But that I don't really know that he had enough of a following on the Mopar side, which is weird when you think about it, because a lot of the Mopar guys, especially back then, were Ford guys coming back into Mopar, meaning that they were Mopar guys kind of beforehand, but they just didn't have anything Mopar wise to get back into, especially, considering the fact that there wasn't a front engine rear drive car like the Challenger for years and years and years. You'd have thought that they would have brought Steve Saleen along, like, hey, dude, you got to do something with this thing. You got to work your magic and make it do something cool. So for whatever reason, it just never really gelled. It's a good question. I still really don't know. It would have been really cool to have a little bit more development from the Saleen camp with the LX platform. But again, I don't know how involved or invested he was at this point. And, it's like anything else. I mean, if they don't put 100% into it, the results will kind of end up showing for it. So. Tux is asking, is it true that you can own 2 or more vehicles than just one? Yeah, I own a lot. And I don't even own a lot. A lot for me. Yeah, you can own as many as you want, buddy. Cal saying, I think the Saleen was just a supercharged 5.7. Yeah, there was how many were there? At one point in time, there were several supercharged variants of the 5.7 cars. There was that Eagle one that was Roots blower. You had a couple of guys that were running around with Pro Chargers on the things. I mean, neat at the time, but golly, the packages were obnoxiously expensive too. So that's the other thing. You almost wonder if some of the fancier aftermarket guys, they just kind of priced themselves completely out of it, thinking that they were going to just run away to the bank with a bunch of nostalgia dollars, and it basically didn't work out as well as they had hoped. But they're saying, I would like to see Lingenfelter do Corvettes again, see what crazy stuff they do with the C8. Man, I tell you what, I don't know that they could get a whole lot crazier than what like Pites is doing with them, or what a few of these guys have been doing with these C8 Corvettes. There's a lot that's involved right now with the C8 in terms of programming. I mean, it's gotten down to the point where, Alex Pites and Pites Performance is basically developing their own software to work with those things. So it's pretty cool. And they're getting a lot of power out of those cars. I mean, there's already one of those Vettes in the 8s, if you can believe that. Pretty sick stuff. Cameron's got a good question. Should Chrysler have made the current generation 300 SRT and 300 SRT Hellcat, or made it a Hellcat? One of the they should have. I mean, I'm surprised that they didn't. The weird thing, though, is that the United States market didn't get the 6.4. You could get the 6.4 in other markets, just not here, for reasons. But I guess the 300 not having a Hellcat variant is really one of the weirder what if scenarios that I just can't wrap my head around. I'm sure that there's reasons for it. I just don't know if those reasons are really all that good. Jarrell's in saying, Amy Mason, I have a wide body Challenger Scat Pack. Would like to know if any cams out there where I won't lose bottom end torque, but would gain throughout the rev band. Do I need a custom grind? Carlo saying, Daryl, sniper cam. Absolutely. So the sniper grind is a pretty mild camshaft. There's really not a whole lot to write home about it in terms of sound. It's half the reason why I called it the sniper grind is because that cam doesn't really have a lope to it, but just so happens to pick up power literally everywhere. It acts like, it makes the engine basically act like it's just got more displacement. That's the cam that was in Quick Brick's car. And when I originally developed that camshaft was my personal grind. It was going to go into Shalandra. And when I got rid of Shalandra, ended up obviously not putting the cam in the car. I had one shop that was buying a ton of those cams and was getting really good results with them. Quick Brick's car went 1130 at 121 miles an hour with a 157 60 foot, darn near pulling the front tires off the ground. That picture is an awesome picture that I took of that car. But that's at 4,650 pounds race weight. That car was really heavy. So obviously you pull about 200 pounds out of that thing and you can kind of see where the numbers are going to fall in that. So, that would probably be the best route for you to go. And, Dr. Differential that's who I put that cam together for. A very similar cam to that is my CD01 through Pikes Performance. Really good cam. You have to put obviously lifters, push rods, and springs. You do absolutely have to have springs with that cam. But again, it'll pick up power pretty much everywhere. As a matter of fact, funny, you should ask. Hold, please. Let me see if I've got might have a dyno chart of just that. Let's see. No, I don't think I do. Some generic dyno charts of different cars. No, I don't have one of that particular car. Although I do, if you look in my playlists, I think it's under product reviews. I do have, in fact, I may even have that car on the dyno somewhere in there. Product reviews, or man, maybe I don't think it's under my thoughts. Anyway, you'll see that car on the dyno. And as far as power goes, I know that on a dyno jet, it made just shy of 500 horsepower to the rear wheels. That's with long tubes and, everything else under the sun you can do to that car, ported intake, ported throttle body, etc. But a really good cam nonetheless. And there's some folks that swear by that thing. So I've driven the car several occasions, lots of fun to drive. Probably one of the better bets to go. The thing is that another reason why I like that cam, I get it, the downside is the sound. Okay. Well, here's the thing. It doesn't like to push through lights. It doesn't jerk. It doesn't do anything dumb like that. It's pretty cool in the fact that it does make power literally everywhere on the hit, and it doesn't have a lope. And part of that is a good thing because, man, let me tell you something. If you've got something that's chopping its ass off, that is a symptom of a problem that is known as poor drivability. And that cam's got really good drivability. So again, not a monster cam, but still big enough to be entertaining, if nothing else. And where you really notice a difference is from about 4,500 RPM on up. The car just doesn't nose over. It'll just kind of keep carrying that power out. So it's a good thing. Catalyst is asking if the Charger was a two-door, do you think it would have negatively impacted Challenger sales? No, I don't. But I will say this. If I'm being really honest, I am very surprised that we didn't have a two-door Charger. And you have to remember that the Charger is a very familiar platform to me because it is the identical platform to my 09 AMG E63 that I had. So if I were to take you, sit you in that E63, and then sit you in the Charger, you really wouldn't notice a difference. I mean, yeah, there's some differences, but there's a lot more similarities than there are differences. You know, if you were blindfolded coming into this. So the funny thing about this is you've also got the C63. Basically, it's just a shortened down W211 platform. Would have been perfect. And if I'm being honest, would have been a great car to drive, would have looked amazing. It would have been a little bit more, how do I say this? Youth friendly. Could you imagine that thing with a wide body? But the other thing is I think you could have made it smaller. It would have been just slightly smaller because of proportions and all that. I think it would have ended up being slightly smaller, shorter really, than the Challenger, maybe a little bit more narrow. Would have probably been about 200 pounds lighter. And it might have been a better performing car as well. So you can start to say, yeah, it's a little bit too Camaro-y for my taste. That's a little bit too Mustang-y for my taste. Valid point. I might have to agree with you on that. See, the reason why the Challenger does so well is because it strikes a lot of heart chords for people. It's got the nostalgia factor, and it's got the big factor. It's got the comfy factor. It's got the barge factor that, believe it or not, people are looking for. It's one of the reasons why the Challenger is doing so well. One of the reasons why the Camaro did not do as well. People like big, comfy cars, and Challenger is no exception to that. But man, that two-door Charger, I thought, no kidding, it's no joke, I really did think that the Challenger was going to get axed in 2018. And what was going to take its place would be the CUDA, and that the CUDA was going to be a two-door shortened version of the Charger. Wide body option, when that came out, I was going, dude, why are they not doing this? This is like a youth play. You could completely reinvent this thing. But then the Challenger kept selling, and it was selling really, really well, and they were not going to upset that apple cart. I was a little bit bummed, but I get it, completely understand it, and, well, Challenger is going to ride out the rest of this LX platform, and we're not going to have a two-door Charger, CUDA, if you will. But I thought it was an awesome idea, and I thought it would be a really cool, 2018, the Demon is here. We're going to send out the Challenger. It's done its thing. It brought all the retro styling and everything else. Yay, you did good, kid. And usher in basically a handover of the baton, if you will, to what would have been the CUDA, which would have been, again, that shortened, maybe lighter than the Challenger Charger variant. What could have been, right? They're saying, I know Callaway's going to do something with the C8 for sure. He liked the Aero Wagon. Very cool. George R. saying, on topic, I had a chance to get a 99 TA WS6 in early 2000. It was new leftover inventory, but I decided not to get it. Sure wish I would have grabbed it. Yeah, and there's a couple of cars that kind of fall into that category as well. One of them was, well, in 2016, one of the Vipers that I could have picked up for a song, but that song was still a lot more money than I could afford at the time. And there's a couple of cars that I guess would also fall in. Anyway, I never thought about the WS6 like that. Again, because there was so much other stuff going on with me at the time with the Dodge stuff, with the Vipers. But I always really liked them. But I don't know. It's one that I passed over. And now today, when I see one, I kind of have that same feeling like, damn, what would it be like to just have one of those things? Buddy of mine had one as an automatic car. What a WS6 is, a Trans Am LS car, though. He didn't have it for very long, and I didn't really understand why, and I really liked that car, so like those cars. Tux is asking, what are some other vehicles that you own besides the Challenger? Own the Fox Body Mustang, which is Foxy, the 72 C20 GMC, which is Sierra, got the work truck, which is Buffy, and that is it for the ones that I have. Of course, the wife has got a couple of hers in her arsenal as well. But those aren't the only ones that I have owned. I've been through a lot of cars, I can tell you that. Let's see. Oh, but they're saying the LX platform Charger should have been called the Monaco or Polara. That would have been cool. It would have made more sense. It would have made more sense because it was a four-door. I get that for sure. Just doesn't have that panache that Charger does. Chuck's saying, I could have got a Daytona Charger for 10 grand less than my Shaker. I hate sedan and I'd stayed on that Shaker 6-speed. I understand that. Tux is saying he got to see the Durango SRT. Very nice. I like it. Terrell is saying, thanks, B. Mason. Yeah, thank you. Cal is saying, I wish they could bring back the Cordoba. Dude, so, oh man, it's funny you mentioned that. So I got on a little bit of a kick, and I haven't really shook it yet, of the Malaise era personal coupes, like the Cordoba and some other. There are, God, there's so many of them, but just the gaudy, so bad that they're good cars. Like so y'all know that I am just I've got such one of my biggest crush cars that I've never been able to find is a Mark III Lincoln. They are really hard to find in good shape. When they are in good shape, they're usually really pricey. But dude, I love those cars. And so moving forward from that, you had this whole string of cars going into the 70s and kind of into the 80s, but the really raunchy ones are all from the 70s. And it could have been the Cordoba. It could have even been that there was a car called the Charger, but it was another one of these personal coupes that just took things way too far. But think of it like this, okay? Think of the 400 era. And if you're not familiar with what the 400 era is, the 400 looks really good on paper, but it is a absolute turd of an engine. Doesn't matter if it's Chevy, Ford, or Dodge. The 400 is kind of there's a lot of potential there. Don't get me wrong. But the 400 is a small block, basically, that's been bored and stroked, but it has absolutely no compression. The cylinder heads are junk. A lot of them had 2-barrel carburetors, and most of them didn't spin past about 3,800 RPM. You would be real lucky to find one that would actually cover 4,200 RPM. But they did one thing really, really, really well, and that's make torque. A lot of tip-in torque. The type of engine that would lumber going, it basically was like having a big block in a small engine block size, and they just didn't let them spin that high. Because back then, performance really wasn't the thing. They needed something with torque. The 350s, the 360s, and the like, the 351s were all getting choked to death by emissions equipment, and the manufacturers hadn't quite figured out how to make power alongside of having the emissions equipment. So anyway, enter the 400. So you regain all this torque through cubic inches, and then you throw catalytic converters and EGRs and two-barrel carburetors and everything else at it. Dump compression so it runs on regular gas, and you get this engine that basically makes more torque than the 350 did down low. It just could not spin. It would give the initial hit, and then that was it. That'd be all she wrote. Think TBI 305, same idea. So anyway, those are some of the cars. And what really got me kicking on this was, I got to looking at the Aspen. The Aspen is really kind of the pivot car for me in all of this. The Aspen Roadrunner, but any of the Aspen, like the Aspen GT or any of that's really the car that kind of got me thinking about this. And then I was like, man, there were some really cool cars that I never, ever, ever would have thought of. The Jeep Honchos, things like that. Just this real macho looking stuff that I was thinking, damn, man, they need to do something like that again. I get the whole muscle car thing. Yeah. Okay, fine. Fast. Woo, whatever. I've kind of already played fast, and what's funny is that you can kind of pick up on the mentality here. Like, I'm not getting rid of the Hellcat, but the Hellcat is really cool because it's got all the fast and then all the creature comforts and everything else you could ever really want. Mid to low 10-second car that has steering wheel heater and seat warmers and stuff like that. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get a little bit of my, a little bit of the flavor from the 70s stuff that I just lust after because I just love the stuff that's just completely different and kind of weird. But I get all the power that I want too, so that makes it fun. Plus I can tune it, go hurdle a bunch of feelings, and, hey, even better for me. Anyway, the idea behind all this is that's where a lot of this came from. And why didn't I ever consider that Aspen? Why didn't I ever consider the later Chrysler 300s? If you're not familiar with those are freaking beasts of a car. There's so many really neat, cool cars that you just never really consider. And so really my challenge for you guys is, go back through history, and instead of looking at Camaros and AMC AMXs and the stuff that is in the books, right? This is a muscle car. There's a lot of really cool cars out there. And for me, there's, a lot of them came in at about the time that there was no more muscle. People say, oh, car industry's dead. There's no more muscle cars. There kind of were, actually. They just kind of took on a different personality. And so again, in looking into these things, I was just mesmerized by some of the cars, the wormhole you can fall into, when you're like, man, I got to get some sleep. And you start playing around on your phone. And next thing you know, you've been looking at Malaise era Luxo barges, and it's 2:00 in the morning. Like, what the hell happened? So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that you do. Tux is saying the Chrysler Cordoba looks amazing. It's way older than my third dream car, the 96 Sebring. Oh, it's way, way older than that. Randy's saying he loved his Murata. That's another awesome one. Good call, man. Madera's saying the Imperial would be cool to see. If they could bring the styling along with it, it would be cool. George is saying Mark III Lincoln was a sweet car, dude. The Mark III was delicious in that burgundy color, man. Are you kidding me? Dude, I don't know. I mean, black always, that's always the way to go. The tuxedo black is always really pretty with those cars. That whole Bible black Lincoln thing, you got to know that's the awesome one. But the burgundy is sick to death. The green is nasty. I mean, they had this presence. They're just so dirty looking. I love those cars. Cal said it had a rich Corinthian leather, which is funny about rich Corinthian leather because I don't know, in trivia time, there is no such thing as Corinthian leather. That's the seats were made in a plant in New Jersey. But they were saying, I like the Plymouth Valiant Scamp. Very cool car. The LA 360 was a dog, but it could be tuned for good power. The funny thing is yeah, they were pretty puggish, but yeah, no, a set of heads, cam, and intake on those things, and you've got a 450 horsepower small block if you really turn the wick up, and for sure 400, 385 to 400 is not that hard to come by with those things. So yeah, and that's the thing, man. They're so, it's such a doable thing. I don't know, if I had unlimited time and resources, I would absolutely have to have some of those sweet, old, awesome Malaise era cars that again, they're the cars that you forget about. They're the cars that you never really would have considered. But again, looking back at it, I think it would have been a whole lot more fun and maybe a whole lot less cliche at the same time. But with that, guys, we are coming up on an hour and a half, so I have got to pull the ripcord. I will be up early, working right on the other side of that wall, getting little Miss Chandelier her, I don't know, painting her nails, if you will, with those calipers. I'm looking forward to that and can't wait to get it done. It's been something that's been just absolutely annoying the heck out of me for quite a bit of time. So that is the next project. But I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Would not do this without you. Love each and every one of you guys. So remember, if you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Ray, miss you, love you, brother. And with that, we are going to wrap it up on this Saturday. Y'all have a fantastic start to your week next week, and we will catch up with you soon. That's a wrap. Take care.